90% of AI proof of concepts never make it to production. We all know the story. Most pilots, they fail. There are a lot of reasons, but if we drill it down, the number one killer is data access. Your agents can't see the data that they need when they need it in the format they expect. And without data, nothing can be done. At the same time, context is fragmented across Salesforce, Snowflake, SAP, ServiceNow, and suddenly your 2 million AI investment is stuck in pilot hell. So, how do you actually get AI agents into production with the connectivity, context, and control that enterprises demand? That's exactly what we are diving into today's discussion with Marie Forshaw, SVP of Product Marketing at CData. Marie, it's great to have you on the show.
Glad to be here.
I've been covering CData for a long time. You folks have been in the data connectivity space for years. Can you talk about how are you positioning Connect AI for organizations who are trying to move AI from proof of concept to actual production? Because the fact is, a lot of these pilot projects, they fail. They spend a lot of money in it, but they don't materialize. So talk about that. And if possible, before that, just also give a little quick summary or background of Connect AI so they also know the context here.
Connect AI and the way that we are positioned and recently announced some new product features around is the idea that we're taking the connectivity platform that we built up over our 15 years in market and turning it into a data layer for AI to do exactly what you described. Make sure that you can make your AI investments successful in production. And the way that we do that is that with that connectivity platform, we can connect to over 350 sources across your business. Whether they're SaaS, ERP, CRM, databases, data warehouses, you name it, we can connect to it. And you can connect that to our platform once and invest in that connectivity and that governance layer with us. And then you have one connection up to any AI tool of choice. We also support analytics and automation tools as well. And so the idea is that you can really invest in building out that connectivity and the governance layer on top of it to bring that connectivity both in terms of reading that data from your AI tool of choice and also writing back to those systems for agentic action.
And as we are discussing that, most AI initiatives fail, before they reach production. Now, it depends on the specific use case. There can be variable causes there. But if we just specifically focus on data, from what you are seeing with customers, where are the biggest data challenges that lead to that failure?
Absolutely. And I think that, as Gen AI has taken the world by storm, I think that the focus to date has been on the AI technology itself, on the LLM. And I think what we are seeing and what the market is realizing is that that technology is working well, but if you don't have the data to support it in the right way, that's where most initiatives are failing. And what does that actually mean is that we think about it in three buckets. And the first is pure connectivity. Can your AI access the things that it needs to answer the questions and do the things that you're asking it to do? And we know that most MCP or Model Context Protocol servers on the market, which is how most people are connecting their AI to their source systems today, they're really built around thin REST API wrappers. And what I think everyone is realizing is that you actually really need deep integration behind that MCP server to make it effective. And so that's the first thing that we offer. So every one of those 350 systems we connect to have been built on our driver technology. And so that means that we can access essentially everything in that source system, all the fields, objects, entities, even your custom fields and custom objects, and surface that up to your AI. And so I think it's that depth of connectivity is the first place where AI initiatives can fall down. And then the second thing that we think about is that semantic context. And context is a very popular term in AI today. We hear a lot about context engineering. And what that means is that you want to make sure that you're not just giving data to AI, that the AI can understand what that data means and use it effectively to do whatever it is you're asking it to do. And so we provide that semantic context. And the way that we talk about it, it's not in a semantic layer concept, it's in source level intelligence. And so again, through that connectivity that we've offered and that we built up in market, we're able to have the AI understand how that source system works in a really meaningful way. And so essentially, if you're asking Claude or ChatGPT to do something with Salesforce, They can understand how Salesforce works as a system, what are accounts, what are objects, what are contacts, how do they all relate to each other, much like a human would. And we see that leads to a much higher effective and accurate rate when working with AI. And then the last pillar that we think about that you need to address with your infrastructure for your AI initiatives to be successful is what we think of in control. And again, very popular and critical to enterprise AI deployments. And the way that we think about control is that you want to make sure you have that governance layer as well as controlling identity and access before it gets to the model. And there's conversations in the market about getting the right instructions or building it into the agent builder or the AI itself. And we see that that is not an effective way to make sure you have this control in place. You want to build it into a layer before it gets to the AI, and that's what we can offer. So you can restrict what somebody can do with AI through Connect AI, through our data layer, before that data ever reaches the model. And then we really put a focus on identity within that as well. And so if your user is accessing, again, taking Salesforce as an example, we know who that user is in Salesforce when we authenticate all the way back to the source. So it's respecting an organization's permissions that they've invested in and they've built up over time from day one. And then we can offer additional controls on top of that for an AI context.
Very well explained. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to talk a bit about the latest release of Connect AI. What are some of the key enhancements that you have added, and what problem does each one solve?
Absolutely. And so we have a very exciting release that came out this past Monday. And we see it as really kind of pushing the boundaries of what MCP and MCP connectivity can do for organizations. And we think about it in that same framework I just walked through: connectivity, context, and control. And so if you take connectivity, the first thing that we're releasing is the ability to extend our live read-write access to sources behind your firewall. So things like SAP, SQL Server, Postgres, we can connect to with that Connect gateway to make sure that none of your data is off limit in terms of sources. And then if we think about the second pillar in the context bucket, I think this is the most exciting one. And so we have a lot in here that I think is really novel for the market, and again, for how MCP servers have been constructed. And what we're offering here is 3 different types of MCP tools. And so tools are essentially the way that you tell an AI what it can do with the system that you're providing. So it can tell, the fields that it can access and the actions that it can take. So tools are really critical in how you can interact with those source systems. And what we're able to do is offer 3 different types of those tools. And that's really unique on the market. And the first is our universal tools. And so the way that these work is that they're normalized operations across all of the source systems we connect to. They're schema aware. They're ideal for exploration and multi-source reasoning without blowing up the context window and causing tool sprawl, which is a common issue with other MCP providers. So it starts with that universal tool layer, which gives a lot of versatility for the agent, essentially lets it read, access, do anything that's available within that source system. And then the second type of tool is what we call source tools. And this is the most typical pattern that you'll see on the market already. And it's tightly defined operations that are specific to each system. So again, using Salesforce, you can go in with a source tool and see, convert a lead or close an opportunity, very typical actions for that system we're providing out of the box. And the idea with the source tools is that you can get down to a very granular level of control with those source tools. If you want to let somebody, be able to update a certain type of record but not another, you're able to go into our system, into Connect AI, and check and uncheck those source tool actions to configure what someone can do. And then the third bucket, which I think is, again, pretty unique for what's available, is custom tools. And so they are just like they sound. You're able to come into our system and create purpose-built operations for your specific workflows. So whether you want to write repeatable queries with explicit data access limits or create some pre-configured actions that somebody's going to want to take with repeatability, really supporting this idea of deterministic use cases as part of an agent workflow, you can do that with custom tools. And the benefit of that is that, like I mentioned, it can be very explicit in what you want the agent to do. It's repeatable, and it also is very efficient. It can reduce your token usage meaningfully. So those are the 3 types of tools that we have announced with this most newest release from Connect AI. And we also pair that with kind of 2 ideas on how you can make sure you're maintaining that control. The first is workspaces. It's really essentially defining the data boundaries. So exactly which data sets, which schemas or views an agent can access, and these can be multi-source in our system. And then toolkits, and that really defines the action boundary. And so it's defining which tool types, and it can be any combination of the three I just walked through, are available to an agent. And so essentially what you can do is you can create a workspace with a specific set of data, you can create a toolkit with a specific set of actions, and surface that up through a dedicated MCP server so that that agent or that user only has access to that defined set of things. And so it's, again, a really great way to make sure that you are giving users and agents the power that you want them to have and the versatility to act, but maintaining that level of control for data and tool exposure.
No, when I'm listening to you throughout this discussion, you have talked about connectivity, you have talked about context and control as kind of three pillars for production AI. Can you break it down for our audience? Why does each matter, and what happens if you miss or skip one?
Absolutely. And what we have found with our customers, and again, we've been around for a while, over 10 years in the market, and we work with some of the biggest companies on their connectivity challenge, including companies like Salesforce, Google, Palantir. We're partnering with Anthropic and Databricks on their AI initiatives as well. So we have some experience with customers in the real world trying to do this. And one of the reasons why we came up with this framework of connectivity, context, and control is that you really need all three for it to work. So if you don't have one of those pieces, then you're not going to make it from that pilot stage to that production stage. And I think that the combination of the three are really what make agents both powerful and trusted, which is key for an organization. So connectivity, again, what we've seen and some of the testing that we have done internally is that if you don't have that depth of connectivity to any given source system and an understanding of how that system works, that's where you run into AI hallucinations or inaccurate or incomplete answers from AI. So that's key. And the same idea with context, making sure that you don't just deliver that data or deliver that data in a way that, overwhelms the AI's context window, which is a big piece of this discussion around context engineering, is key, and being able to do that at scale. And then control, we've talked about, you have to make sure that your agent's not going to have unintended consequences or risk when you deploy it. And so you can't lose any one of those pillars. Otherwise, you won't be able to make that successful transition.
One of the biggest challenges with AI is, hallucination is there. Yes, it can get the job done, but there are so many variables. The right agent you're using the right LLM, you're using the right prompt, because AI, in my word, I'm a heavy consumer. It's like a toddler. You have to repeat things again and again to get it right, and it will make a mistake, and it'll say, oops, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, but it will do it again because there is no context in your memory. But your Intel benchmarking shows that Connect AI achieves almost 98.5% accuracy in agent tasks. For someone building AI agents at scale, why does that level of accuracy matter so much? And how do you folks manage to achieve that?
Absolutely. And I think this is one of the most interesting pieces that we're talking about with the new release, is this 98.5% accuracy rate. And I think, as you think about accuracy rates, obviously everyone has an anecdote, like you just shared of, I asked AI this question, it looked like it gave me a very confident answer, I rolled with it, and it turns out it was wrong or incomplete. And I think we've all had that experience. And if you kind of take that lower accuracy rate to start with and you start doing agentic workflows, so you're asking your AI to take action over multiple steps in sequence, that accuracy rate begins to compound. And there's a great quote out there by the CEO of DeepMind, which is an AI lab owned by Google, that talks about how that accuracy rate can compound like interest. And if it's a low accuracy rate to start, you end up with an extremely low accuracy rate at the end of that multi-step sequence. And so making sure that you have the data layer and the data infrastructure in place to start with a very high accuracy rate, it matters for just your one-on-one interactions, for the questions that an individual asks from that, all of our experience that I mentioned. But it becomes critical when you're trying to do action over an agentic workflow, because you can start with, a 75% accuracy rate at the beginning of 5 steps. And at the end of it, you're down to a 25% accuracy rate, which is a non-starter for most organizations. And so it's a really critical idea as you move from pilot to production. And the way that we got to this 98.5% accuracy rate that I mentioned earlier is we've done testing. And so it's just our internal testing. And we have made that testing harness available for anyone who would like to replicate it. But what we did is that we ran, almost 400 prompts across 4 different MCP architecture types, across 5 different source systems. And so we really tried to replicate, what somebody might do in an enterprise scenario, with production-like data, and really try to replicate that in our testing setup. And that's how we came to that 98.5% accuracy rate for CData, because of all the things I mentioned. All of those 3 pillars: connectivity, context, and control. Because we have them, that's how we deliver that accuracy rate. And then we found that others in those other MCP architectural patterns average about 65 to 75% accuracy rate.
When we hear the term enterprise grade security, that could mean a lot of things to a lot of people, and it could be totally different in the context of AI agents. But what does it actually mean in the context of AI agents accessing production data? Are there concerns, because we have seen so many cases? AI can delete things, it can also blackmail you. We are seeing stories, and it can also try to make up fake data just to say, hey, it's there. It has happened on my own system as well, to be honest with you. So can you talk about what are customers more concerned about when we talk about enterprise grade security, but in the context of AI agents?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, as you mentioned, this can strike fear into the hearts of those who are trying to deploy enterprise AI. And from our experience, we kind of see organizations that are leaning in and trying to figure this out proactively, trying to figure out how the infrastructure they have in place, the governance they have in place, how that can apply to AI. And then we see organizations saying, we're not going to allow any Gen AI or any AI tools until we get there. And I think that kind of speaks to how much of an issue and how much of a blocker this can be for organizations to get right. And so as you think about what you need here, I think kind of the first idea, like I mentioned earlier, is that you don't want to rely on your AI agent, your AI tool to enforce your security. You want to make sure you have a layer that is controlling that before it ever gets to the model or the tool. And so that's kind of step one. And I think then kind of the next thing you want to think about is, how do I make sure I understand who or what is accessing this data? And that's really the concept of identity. And so, a lot of other MCP models will just provide a service account that connects to that AI tool from that source system. And we find that's not adequate for a real deployment of AI. You need to know, if someone is accessing data through AI, that you know who that is, that you can record it, and then you can record it back down to the source system to essentially the query level. What did they access? What fields did they access? Who was it? Through what tool? And be able to enforce the permissions that organizations have invested a lot of time in setting up in any given source system. And so I think that's kind of the second step, making sure that you can enforce the identity back to the source system, whether it is a human or whether it is an agent, to be able to have that visibility and enforcement. And then I think kind of the next step up from there is that, whether it's a human, you might want to have some different permissions and governance when accessing through an AI context. So you could say, if a human logs into Salesforce, it's totally fine. If, that person deletes records, we trust them, we know who they are, we know that they will use that power responsibly. But let's say we don't want that person to be able to delete records through Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot Studio, because they can do it on a much larger scale. You can control that type of additional AI permission layer through Connect AI or through whatever system you're using for an AI context. And then I think kind of the last piece that we think about was, related to the release that we talked about today. How can I create, very controlled access to data and to those MCP tools for a given user or a given agent, through the tooling layer or through, a data curation layer, and MCP server access. So I know that I have extreme precision and I have an assurance that data and tools are being accessed responsibly and only when they should be.
Now, last question before we wrap this up is that if there's a data engineer or a platform engineer watching this and thinking about deploying AI agents, what's the first step you would advise them they should take with Connect AI?
Oh, absolutely. So I think it's kind of, the first thing I would think about is that, you may not know where AI is going. And I think we kind of all can relate to that. I think that, especially these roles within an organization are being asked to do something with AI. There's a lot of pressure for organizations to act without always, a clear plan or a clear direction. And so I would say, you might have that mandate, you might be feeling that pressure. Just take, the time to think about how you want your infrastructure to work and how your infrastructure is going to scale in the future for, any AI tool that comes out, in the future, tomorrow that we might not know about today, and how you can accommodate that. And then also, be thinking about how do you represent these three pillars, connectivity, context, and control, in your work and kind of as you start going down this path for your organization? And so I think those are kind of the key things. And also trying to think about, how do you make an investment to enable those things that's going to be reusable? And so that idea behind, individual MCP servers can certainly make the connection, but they can't provide what you need to actually scale that deployment when you're ready. So just kind of having that forethought on, things might change tomorrow in the AI world, but how do I invest in the right pieces of infrastructure to make my organization successful with the large unknown that we have in AI? And I think that will be a very successful first step.
Marie, thank you so much for joining me. It's quite clear after listening to you that connectivity, context, and control, they are not buzzwords anymore. That's where the difference between AI staying in the lab versus running in production is. So thank you for explaining all those, and also thanks for sharing those insights. And as usual, I look forward to chat with you folks again. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here today.
And for those watching, if you're dealing with these exact challenges, getting AI agents access to enterprise data, make sure to check out CData Connect AI and its solutions. And don't forget to subscribe to TFIR, like this video, and share it with your team. Thanks for watching.